Hi guys, it's Mrs. Kushner, and today we're going to take a look at embedding a quote into a piece of writing. Make sure you have your notes ready to go, and let's get started. In this video, you will learn how to insert a quote into any piece of writing and how to correctly cite that quote. All right, last time we looked at the elements of an analytical paragraph, but we really kind of skipped over 2 and 3 that lead into the quote and then the quote with the citation. That is what this video is all about. This video goes in depth into steps 2 and 3 of an analytical paragraph, but I want to be clear that you don't have to be writing an analytical paragraph to use these skills. Any piece of writing at all that requires you to give a quote, these skills will work. You can use these same skills of lead into a quote and give the quote and cite it regardless. All right, let's look at a basic formula. The basic formula is always going to stay the same. You need to introduce your quote, sometimes called leading into, introducing, or embedding the quote. You need to give your quote and you need to give a citation. How you do that, though, is flexible. You have some options. Option 1 is to do it all in one sentence. You can introduce your quote very quickly, maybe just as simple as saying, for example, in chapter 1, Dumbledore says. Could be that short. Or in other cases, you're going to do this in 2 separate sentences. You're going to have a whole sentence to introduce your quote, and then you're going to have a whole separate sentence to give the quote and the citation. Neither option is better or worse. It more depends on what fits the flow of the paragraph that you're writing and the needs of the moment. Okay, so this lead into the quote, what do I mean here? This is a short transition or short bridge. You can think about it visually, bridging your claim and your quote so that your writing doesn't sound choppy. Couple tips though to lead in effectively. Tip 1, don't use the word quote or quotation. We don't need you to say in this quote because your reader is going to see the quote in the quotation marks and know that it's a direct quote. Also, tip 2, always use present tense. You want to say the author argues, the author cautions. You do not want to say the author suggested, ed past tense. Don't need that. Even if they wrote it a long time ago, the author suggests. Present tense. Also, tip 3, notice what is not on my list of the author. Something. Said. Because said is dead. Please do not use the author said in your writing. It is boring. And you are about to go into high school. You are sophisticated writers, and we want to see sophisticated language. So that's the time to pull out your reference list and say, ooh, let me pick a better word than said. Is the author arguing it strongly, or is the author implying it subtly? Pick a word that matches the situation a little better. All right, examples. I'm giving you one of each. Example 1 is where the lead-in is a totally separate sentence. The example 2 is where that lead-in is combined in with the quote. The bold part is the lead-in. So let's look at the first example where the lead-in exists as a separate sentence. Though he does not wear a cape, Atticus Finch fits the classic archetype of a hero. For context, this is referring to Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. And the lead-in is this: he displays heroism through his actions both large and small. And then the quote comes. For example, when his daughter Scout is scared, her screams bring Atticus from his bathroom half-shaven. Now, the reason this bridge is necessary is because without it, your reader is going to be thinking, wait a second, you just called this guy a hero, and now you're talking about him running into a bedroom to check on his daughter. Doesn't seem very heroic to me. But with that bridge, he displays heroism through actions large and small. Your reader's prepared and thinking, oh, this is one of those examples of small forms of heroism. Got it. And they're probably expecting you to give an example of large heroism, later in the paragraph or in the paper. Now, on the other hand, sometimes you don't need that much. In this Harry Potter example, we have, in the Harry Potter series, the author J.K. Rowling suggests the theme that bravery is a virtue. She emphasizes this theme when Dumbledore says, and then she gives the quote. All we really needed was to connect J.K. Rowling to having Dumbledore say the quote and then giving the quote. Easy peasy. All right, now the quotation part itself. This can be a direct quote. This can also be a paraphrased quote, or it could be a combination. Sometimes you're taking a paragraph's worth of text or a couple paragraphs worth of text, and you only need to quote this much of it, but you need to paraphrase everything else that's going on around it. That's what I mean when I say combination, and we'll take a look at that. Regardless, though, of if you quote, paraphrase, or give a combination, you have to cite an idea that is not your own. Anything that comes from a source that is not your own brain, please, you need to cite it to avoid plagiarism. And we'll take a look at how to cite next up after we know how to give the quote. All right, so here is an example that I talked about of that combination. On the right-hand side on the scrap of paper, you can see the full piece of text that the quote was pulled from. And let me just read it here so we're all on the same page. Next morning, I awoke, looked out the window, and nearly died of fright. My screams brought Atticus from his bathroom half-shaven. The world's ending, Atticus! Please do something! I dragged him to the window and pointed. No, it's not, he said. It's snowing. All right, so we have a little girl. She's terrified because she's never seen snow before, and she calls on her dad to rescue her. That is the context that I need to get across. And here in this quote, for example, when his daughter Scout was scared, that underlined part is a paraphrasing of all the underlined sections in the larger quotation. And then the quote itself that I actually wanted to use, her screams brought Atticus from his bathroom half-shaven. That's the literal quote, but combined, it is a combination of paraphrasing and direct quote to make up that entire page of text. All right, now I can hear some of you thinking, can I change a quote? What if the quote doesn't flow in the paragraph? And the answer may surprise you because it is yes, you can. But there are some rules about how you can. If you are going to change a quote, it is only under very specific circumstances. It is to clarify a pronoun. So maybe the pronoun is he or it, and your reader is not going to know who it is or he is. And so instead, you might replace that pronoun with the character name it's referring to. Or it could be to adjust a verb tense. That's another example. Maybe the verb is in past tense, and for the sake of your paragraph, you need it in present tense. You can also make that change. It's okay to change as long as you are absolutely not changing the meaning. If you change the meaning, then it no longer counts. You cannot use that quote. And 2, you have to mark the change in brackets. That's the boxes that I have around the word brackets, so that your reader knows, hey, this is a change from the original. But because you've cited it correctly, they could go back to the original if they wanted to see the exact word-for-word writing. Let's take a look at this here. First with this quote. So pretend we're writing a paper about meditation and you're using this quote. This might seem counterintuitive. Phones are often enemies of calm. All right. And you know you need to keep the quote, but it's not flowing right. So instead, you swap out that little dash for the word since to make it flow. And here's what you get instead. Nierenberg suggests that using an app is a great way to begin meditating, though she notes that this might seem counterintuitive since phones are often enemies of calm. And now it flows so much nicer because you have the word since. A-okay, you didn't change the meaning, and you marked your change in brackets. Ta-da! You can now change a quote following those rules. All right. Citation Basics, this is our last thing, and then we're done with this embedding a quote. Anytime you embed, you have to cite, so we have to know how to cite correctly. First up, notice that there is no period at the end of the quote. So the quote, "Screams brought Atticus from his bathroom half shaven." Even though in the book that's the end of a period, notice we don't put a period because that's not the end of our sentence. Instead, we just put the quotation marks, we put our citation in parentheses, and then the period lives at the end of the sentence. That's the only period you need. Now I know some of you are thinking, but wait a second, what if my quotation ends in a question mark or an exclamation point? And you have a point. That is actually an exception. It has slightly different rules. In that case, let's look at this example. Elie Wiesel's neighbors did not heed his initial warnings that the Jews would be expelled from their ghetto, asking him, "Have you gone mad?" In this case, you're going to keep the question mark or your exclamation point for clarity. That way your reader does understand, oh, I know the emotion with which this question is set, or this statement is said. I know it's a question, or I know it's exclamation point. You still, though, keep the period at the end of the sentence because you still are ending your full sentence. And all sentences end with a period. All right, now what about what's in those little parentheses, guys? That is your citation, and it's a fairly simple thing. If you want more details because you have a very specific circumstance, there are a lot of great online options, or just ask me, I can help you find it. But here are your most frequently used citation. This is what you're going to use on a day-to-day basis. First, there's a known author and a known page number. Easy peasy. Give your quote, then in parentheses, give the last name, the page number, close parentheses, period. So don't think, don't stop, run. Then you close out your parentheses, you give the author's name, Wiesel, you give the page number 86, close parentheses, period. Done. Though, not everything has page numbers, especially now when a lot of your research happens online and there are web pages. That's okay. In that case, you give the author's last name and there's no page number. So there's no right way to meditate. Then you give the author's name from that quote, Nierenberg. Done. The last case is if it's a web page with no author. In that case, you're going to give the title of the page, not the title of the website, but the title of the page itself. So in our example, I Smell to Serious was found on a page called Is Global Warming Real? But I want to caution you here. Think very carefully before using a source that has no author. You need to make sure in that case that your source is credible and is necessary. I say that because there are so many sources out there today where they are credible and they would have an author that you could attribute it back to. It's just easier to confirm credibility. We can take a look at that on a different day. That's a whole different topic, source credibility, but just a warning to think twice about those. Really, you want to stick to the first two. Sources where you know the author, and if they're in print, they'll have page numbers. If they're online, they won't. But either way, where you can directly attribute it back to the writer. All right, in this lesson, you have learned how to insert a quote into a piece of writing and how to correctly cite that quote. Congratulations. Finally, take action now. Write a question about today's lesson on your notes. This one had a lot of small moving parts. So think about that, review your notes and think about that question you have and write it at the bottom of your notes. If you don't have questions, think of one that you think your classmate's gonna have. What question are they gonna have? Because they probably found that part tricky. All right, great work today, and I will see you next time.